members of parliament are no longer public officers during an election campaign. And that means that the Integrity Commission can't investigate their behaviour during an election campaign. Now, you might think this is hypothetical, but we've actually had an example in previous elections where members have been subsequently charged with criminal offences, but they were not able to be investigated by the Integrity Commission because of that loophole.
One for Mum, one for Dad, one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains big economic issues and policy in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute. And as we speak, Tasmania is heading to a state election, an early one, 14 months early. The Tasmanian Liberals have been in power for 10 years. But in May 2023, the Rockcliffe government was sent into minority government when two MPs moved to the crossbench over transparency concerns for two major projects. And since then, there have been some no confidence motions against the Premier and repeated calls to go to an election. And so earlier this month, when the Premier claimed that Parliament had become unworkable, he called an early election.
Tasmanians are heading to the polls. The Premier deciding
that the only way to deliver the certainty and stability the Liberal Party says is needed was to
take his state to the polls early.
After being plunged into minority rule. In an extraordinary move, backbenchers John Tucker and Lara Alexander have quit the Liberal Party over a lack of transparency around two key projects.
We're expected to head to the polls on March the 23rd, and they will be electing more politicians, with Tasmania's lower house to increase from 25 seats to 35.
The top issues of concern for voters are healthcare, cost of living, access to a GP, and cost of housing and renting.
Mainly about a stadium and the money for it and where it could be going on.
It's the last Liberal government in Australia just trying to hold on.
We do have a strong plan, which is all about addressing these important issues, but the Parliament has become unworkable.
Our plan, though, is to win majority so that we can deliver on our plan to deal with the cost of living, to cap and cut energy prices and to repair the health system.
There are a raft of issues shaping the election debate in Tasmania, with health, housing and the cost of living crisis front and centre so far. So too has integrity and the continued absence of disclosure laws for political donations at the state level been part of the election debate. Tasmania is returning the size of its lower house from 25 seats to 35 seats at this election. So there's going to be more members of Parliament after the election, and multiple polls have predicted that the result will be a minority government with independents or minor parties in the balance of power. So this election is shaping up to be a particularly interesting contest in Tasmania. And to take us through all the issues that will shape this state election, I'm talking to Eloise Carr, Director of the Australia Institute in Tasmania. G'day, Eloise.
G'day, Ebony.
So firstly, Tasmania is expanding its House of Assembly. You're going from 25 members to 35 members. What does that mean in terms of the election, Eloise?
Well, it means that we'll have 7 representatives in each electorate instead of 5. And that means that the number of votes that people will need to get elected will be lower. They'll have a lower quota and that means that there's the potential for smaller parties or independents to have a better chance of getting elected.
So this expanded parliament is part of the reason why there's an expectation that this could end up, this election, with a minority government.
That's right, yeah. And also the polls, a couple of polls and several analysts have been discussing the likelihood based on the numbers at the moment, what we might be looking at after this election. And at the moment, it looks like neither major party, neither the Liberals or Labor, will have a majority of seats. They will need 18 seats to have a majority government. But the most recent poll showed that they're looking at either 10 or 11 seats for either of the major parties.
So that's quite a bit less than that magic number of 18.
That's right, yeah. So we're basically looking at either minor parties or independents making up the balance of power. And so we'd be in a situation of a minority government with some sort of power sharing agreement.
More seats up for grabs, it means it opens the door for more independents or minor parties to claim a spot in the House.
We may end up at the end of this campaign in, maybe it's a different set of crossbenchers, but much the same, another minority government.
The number of people who said they'd vote outside the major parties and the Greens increased.
Tasmania can't afford the uncertainty of minority government.
Tasmanians may need to expect more instability or maybe even more cooperation from their new government.
So minority governments often get accused of being unstable, but just before we move on to other issues in this election, how has this Liberal government been going? Would you characterise it as stable?
Yeah, look, I think it depends on the attitude. I think there's plenty of examples around the world where minority governments can work, but you've got to go into it with a willingness to make it work and a willingness to have genuine discussions and negotiations on different public policy matters. So far, the current government's had a mantra of, we will only govern in majority. But I think this time around, hopefully their attitude will change, because there is looking like being a mandate for them. If there is a minority government, then the mandate is clear that the Tasmanians want negotiation, genuine discussion and genuine negotiation, and a cooperative attitude in the Parliament.
Well, we can certainly hope for such an outcome, Eloise. I did want to ask next about Australia Institute research that has shown that Tasmania currently has some of the worst political donations disclosure laws in Australia. Can you just explain where that is at the moment and how bad they are?
Well, they are the worst because we don't actually have any. Despite there being a commitment over 5 years ago to introduce political donation disclosure laws, that has not eventuated. We actually had legislation go through Parliament last year, but the debate on the legislation was delayed for so long, for multiple years, that unfortunately those laws are not in place in time for this current election, which means that Tasmanians will go to yet another election without knowing where their politicians are getting their money from. There's actually an article today published by an independent journalist, and he has been seeking voluntary commitments from major parties to disclose their political donations, and he did not have a positive response. Last time at the 2021 election, when this issue was raised, the major Liberal and Labor parties committed to disclosing some donations, but in the end, they only disclosed minimal amounts, one donation each, one major donor each. I think the Greens have a pretty good position on this. They disclose anything above $1,500 on their website in relatively real time. So it's going to be up to individual candidates whether they want to be transparent about where their money comes from or not. And unfortunately, the laws that even did get passed last year would continue Tasmania to have the worst laws in the country. So we would have gone from having none to one of the worst in the country. And that was because the threshold for disclosure was set too high. There was a third-party loophole you could drive a truck through, and all sorts of other problems with the legislation that Labor actually had committed to fix with by introducing new legislation this year. But now, like so many issues, because we're going to an early election, who knows what's going to happen now.
While there was no evidence of criminal offences, the state's Integrity Commission launched its own top-secret inquiry in 2019 to look into potential misconduct.
The Liberal Party election strategy was to provide small grants to lots of individual community organisations or groups to win favour.
So I take it that means, Eloise, that truth in political advertising laws didn't pass either.
That's right. We're going to election again without any truth in political advertising laws once again. So who knows what will be claimed and counterclaimed. It's unfortunate that it is still legal to lie in a political ad. And, this makes it hard for voters who are trying to make decisions based on information that they are expected to somehow now, discern what is truthful and what is misleading information. A healthy democracy should be based on fact, not misinformation.
So, Eloise, I know another integrity issue that you've been working on is the need to strengthen the Tasmanian integrity watchdog. What's happening in that space?
Yeah, there's been a review on which has dropped off the agenda, like quite a few things that the government's committed to do and have not completed this term of government. The independent review made a range of recommendations back in 2016, and a whole bunch of them still haven't been implemented. We've also recommended additional changes to strengthen the Integrity Commission. At the moment, the Commission has never held a public hearing. That's important because how do people know justices are being done without being able to know about it? And a lot of their reports don't get publicised either. Another real loophole in the legislation for the Integrity Commission is around what happens when an election is called. At the moment, members of parliament are no longer public officers during an election campaign. And that means that the Integrity Commission can't investigate their behaviour during an election campaign. Now, you might think this is hypothetical, but we've actually had an example in previous elections where members have been subsequently charged with criminal offences, but they were not able to be investigated by the Integrity Commission because of that loophole.
So is it fit for purpose, the Tasmanian watchdog?
It's really not. We really need to redesign it. Throw this one out. Let's start again. Let's design a fit-for-purpose integrity body that can look into third parties that may be influencing the impartial administration of, the government's work. And let's hold public hearings and let's close the loopholes.
Researchers are raising the alarm over the rapid decline of Tasmania's endemic Maugean skate.
The Maugean skate only exists in Macquarie Harbour on Tasmania's west coast.
Amid concerns about the impact fish farming was having on Tasmanian waterways.
Macquarie Harbour, low oxygen levels and poor water quality have led to a sharp decline in the population. Scientists warn one extreme weather event could wipe it out forever.
The natural attributes of the harbour have made it popular with fish farmers, but scientists say the rise of the industry has coincided with the decline of a little-known creature that lives nowhere else on Earth.
On this podcast previously, we've discussed a number of other issues, including the issue of the endangered Maugean skate in Macquarie Harbour and how salmon farming is impacting on that. What's happening in that space, Eloise, this election?
Yeah, so we've got some new evidence, scientific evidence that's emerged in recent years that just shows the impact of salmon farming on the waters of Macquarie Harbour, a third of which is within the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area on the west coast of Tasmania. And this Maugean skate, which is a ray-like animal.
Like a little stingray it looks like, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And it's been around since the time of the dinosaurs. It's actually survived since then. It's recognised as a World Heritage Value, and it's being threatened by the water quality that has become so poor that there's such low levels of oxygen in the harbour waters that this is actually threatening the skate with extinction. Now, there's currently an EPBC Act, which is our national environmental law. There's a review of the decision that allowed large-scale farming in Macquarie Harbour. That's happening right now. So Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek is deciding what she wants to do in response to this new information.
But what is the Tasmanian government doing, Eloise?
Well, unfortunately, both Liberal and Labor parties are not recognising the science. They're saying that the skate can coexist with the salmon industry in the harbour. But the science is clear. We have independent scientists from IMAS, with researchers from all sorts of well-recognised research institutions that are telling us very clearly that we need to get salmon farming out of the harbour if we want to prevent the skate from becoming extinct. It's just not the right place. It's a very unique environment and with poor flushing and low oxygen, and it's just not the right place for salmon farming to occur.
And so Tasmania obviously has its history of letting the Tasmanian tiger go extinct. And the possibility is if we don't end salmon farming in Macquarie Harbour, the skate could go extinct as well. Is it that dire?
It really is that dire. The population has dropped by 47% in the last decade, and they're concerned that it will continue in that trajectory. There's very few juveniles coming through in the population. And let's just remember, this is a place where people travel from all over the world to see the mouth of the Franklin River, to see this beautiful World Heritage area. And if they're going there and there's another extinction that's happened in that area, I think that's a real concern for the tourism industry in the area.
Yeah, certainly, and a lot of jobs associated with that.
Opponents say the technicality means the government has been illegally logging forests for decades.
Confidence and industry policy that so many people are connected to as their jobs in their lives in, say, salmon and forestry.
Tasmania's economy and its employment prospects depends on its magnificent environment. Don't be part of the problem. Green your vote.
I want to continue with another environmental and climate change issue for Tasmania, and that is ending native forest logging. So we did see last year that Victoria and Western Australia both states, to end native forest logging this year, and they've done that. What's happening in Tasmania on this issue?
So you're right. There is an opportunity off the back of the decision in Victoria and Western Australia where we could end native forest logging in Tasmania. Tasmania has already transitioned 80% of its forestry production to plantations, and its plantation industry can survive without native forest logging. This would be a really strong outcome for climate. It's the fastest way to address emissions in Tasmania. And we can do it without market-based mechanisms. We just need to make the decision to do it. It's a small employer. 99% of Tasmanians do not work in the forestry or related industries.
So a little bit like salmon farming there, these are two industries where the role of it in the Tasmanian economy is exaggerated, and the public is often led to believe it's much, much bigger than it actually is.
That's exactly right. Because they are such small industries, we could end them with negligible economic impact on the state as a whole.
And it would be a huge win for the climate, for reducing emissions and for habitat destruction in the same way as ending salmon farming in Macquarie Harbour would help out the skate. We know that native forest logging is obviously destroying the habitat of lots of endangered species, and just in general it's been going on for far too long in Tasmania. And as you point out, we've already seen a lot of the private forestry industry move over to plantations. The next thing I want to ask about is climate change, Eloise. We've just touched on two really big environmental issues in Tasmania, and we know climate change is impacting and really starting to bite for a lot of people, not only just in Tasmania, but around the country. We've seen record temperatures and heat waves. We're seeing more and more frequent bushfires, more intense cyclones in the very far north of the country. How is climate change playing out in Tasmania at the moment? What are some of the impacts that Tasmania is experiencing?
Look, we've had one of the worst marine heat waves off the east coast of Tasmania this summer. The east coast waters are warming almost 4 times faster than the global average. And that means we've got a huge suite of new animals that are moving further south from their previous ranges. We know that salmon from fish farms have been dying in vast numbers and have been being trucked out of fish farms off the east coast. And this is likely to be affecting other marine life as well, like actual native marine species as opposed to farmed animals. And this is forecast to continue. There's a consensus of forecasts that we will continue to experience marine heat waves in the future.
Costs, health and housing are much more likely to drive a voter's intent than a stadium.
Increasingly, people who are presenting to us seeking food support are employed.
Property prices here have gone up dramatically, a lot of investors in the market, so people are struggling to find affordable places for rent.
They can skip meals, not to alarm the children and feed them.
53% of Tasmania's Year 12 students finish having completed and achieved a Year 12 outcome. Only 53%. The national average is 76%.
So, Eloise, we've got a bunch of key issues on the agenda, integrity really leading the way there. We've got some key environmental issues, but we are in the middle of a cost of living crisis as well, and I know that's a big issue in Tasmania. We've recently seen the federal government make big changes to the Stage 3 tax cuts that will help a lot of low and middle income earners in Tasmania. But just how difficult is the cost of living for Tasmanians at the moment during this election? How big of an issue is it going to be for people?
It's certainly been a big issue so far. Cost of living is a major concern for Tasmanians. We also have a housing crisis. So there's been announcements already to try and address housing shortages, including increasing rates for short-term holiday accommodation and waiving stamp duty for first home buyers.
So lots of issues on the agenda. When is the actual election, Eloise?
It's Saturday, March the 23rd, and hopefully everyone will get out and vote and engage in their democratic rights.
And the Australia Institute will be hosting a series of events during the election, and we should just remind people that they can head to our website at australiainstitute.org.au as we announce those. And the intention really is to bring the public into the election debate and kind of give a platform to talk about a number of issues.
We'll have something in Hobart, Launceston and in the northwest of the state on some of the key issues that we're working on, including integrity in politics and forestry and salmon farming.
So head on over to australiainstitute.org.au and you'll be able to find all the details for our upcoming events, including during the state Tasmanian election. Final thoughts on the state election, Eloise. What should people keep in mind when they're thinking about what's going to be the outcome for this election?
Well, one of the things I often think about is Tasmanians have a pretty special lifestyle, and that means they get out and they enjoy the environment. But unless they're willing to actually really think about what's going on, some of the impacts that are happening to our environment, that, you know, they're risking some serious ramifications for their lifestyles that they currently enjoy and presumably want to continue to enjoy into the future. So, you know, think about the environment when you vote this time round.
Thanks so much, Eloise.
Thanks, Ebony.
This episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 20th of February, and things may have changed since recording. If you liked today's episode, please rate and review us. It helps other people to find Follow the Money. And if you're after more economic analysis, you should listen to the Australia Institute's new podcast, Dollars and Cents, with Greg Jericho, Chief Economist at the Australia Institute and Centre for Future Work, and popular economist of Grogonomics with Guardian Australia. And if you like Follow the Money and you want to help us to continue to do work with impact and influence, please consider supporting the Australia Institute with a small tax-deductible gift today at australiainstitute.org.au. You can visit our website for all our latest research and content, and we're on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS. My Twitter handle is ebony_Bennett with a _N_T. Eloise is at Ginevra E. Our producer Jennifer Macy is at Jennifer Macy, with additional editing by Emily Perkins. Our theme music is by Jonathan McPeak from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Thanks for listening.